Hello and welcome to this webinar on the Precepting Performance Improvement Program, a pilot program with the American Board of Family Medicine. Thank you all for joining us today. We're glad to have you here. And today we have with us Annie Rutter, who is heading up the task force for the STFM Preceptor Expansion Initiative, and Kevin Graves, who is with the American Board of Family Medicine. So we're glad to have you all here. And without further ado, we'll kind of get going here with the presentation. But first, right before we have everyone kind of go through the material of the presentation, we'd actually like to go ahead and launch an audience poll and find out, for those of you who are attending, if you've already completed an application for this program and whether or not you're kind of in process. So that'll help us know what kinds of information that you guys are looking for from this. And thanks for kind of putting your votes in. We've got a lot of you have already submitted your votes, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results. Wow, looks like none of you have yet completed an application for this program, so that's perfect. That's exactly what we kind of wanted to know with that information. So, without further ado, let's kind of get going. Annie, over to you.
Thanks for joining us today. The ABSM is part of a bigger preceptor expansion project that's been taking place over the last year or so. STFM has really led this effort, and this is one component of really 5 tactics that we're trying to address to really look at the preceptor shortage crisis across the United States. And so the first one is working with CMS to revise student documentation guidelines. And while this webinar isn't about that, those revisions have taken place. And so look for STFM at the homepage for more information regarding that. The second is integrating interprofessional and interdisciplinary education into ambulatory primary care settings, really looking at ways of getting multiple learners into one site to increase the pool of preceptors. The third is looking at developing standardized onboarding processes. This is not just for students, but also for the preceptors, and really helping integrate students in authentic ways in the ambulatory setting to make them the most useful and to get preceptors to really be interested in having students in their offices. The fourth is working on developing educational collaboratives so that this work and these administrative burdens can be decreased by putting networks together and really help the preceptors. And then the fifth and final one is really talking about promoting productivity incentive plans that include teaching and develop a culture of teaching in clinical settings. Our goal through this pilot is to work really in the fifth tactic to really find a way to incentivize our preceptors to teach and reward them for the excellent teaching work that they're already doing. So Emily, you can advance the slide.
Kevin, over to you.
Yeah, so there are, sorry about that, I was on mute. There are multiple parts to the ABFM's continuous certification process, and what we want to do is offer credit for the performance improvement requirement that all of our diplomates are required to do every 3 years, and give that credit to those that are participating in this program, that are performing as preceptors and improving over time the way in which they're teaching in their local environment. We can go to the next slide. So the precepting program, just the ABFM in conjunction with the STFM, we're just offering this program for those physicians who are, like I was saying, performing an improvement project around improving their own teaching, the delivery of teaching, whether it's for themselves or their group or their organization, and are identifying gaps in their system or in the way that they do things on their own. So we are going to give performance improvement credit for those during the pilot and ultimately after the pilot. We keep saying the word pilot, and as we go to the next slide, I just want to make clear that this is a pilot in that we want to learn as well how to do this right going forward. So this isn't a pilot to determine whether or not we will do it going forward. It's a pilot to determine how best to continue this program going forward in conjunction with the STFM. Annie, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Yeah. So looking at this program, it's really intended for organizations, medical schools and residency programs, as well as any other academic unit, to engage in this process. So for pilot sponsors, that would be an academic unit. So you'll see sponsor or academic unit sort of used in various ways throughout this presentation and through the application process. And that really refers to the centralized organization that's going to be monitoring these pilot programs. So basically, to become one of these academic units or a pilot sponsor, you have to do a couple of things. One is complete a brief questionnaire about your academic unit, and that's the application that's online. And we'll talk about that in a little while. The questionnaire is very straightforward. It's really looking for demographic information, looking for the size of your program, what kind of students are you teaching residents as well, how many preceptors could potentially be affected by this. And the goal is so that we pick a variety of different sites, and so that when we, as Kevin mentioned, are looking for ways to best implement this project moving forward, we've actually had a lot of different variation in the types of academic units or sponsors that we've had, so that we feel as though we've addressed all the different logistical issues that may arise. We must also agree to participate in quarterly web conferences. Again, the goal of this is so that we can troubleshoot any issues when we roll this out starting hopefully next year. And we have to commit to being able to participate in those web conferences. And then your job as an academic unit or as a sponsor is to monitor and report the completion of the projects by the diplomat. So your individual preceptor is positioned to work for you or work for your students. You would be, as the academic unit, in charge of really looking at their projects and then testing the board that those projects were done and that all the requirements were met. Or in the figuring out the individual preceptors or individual requirements, they're going to take your word for it. And then the other element is to complete a final survey at the end of the pilot. This will be important, again, for us to gather information so that when this is rolled out, we've really smoothed out all the edges of this project. Emily, you can advance.
And I'll just speak up real quick just to, Annie, you had a little bit of breaking up, I think, with your audio there. It sounds clear right now, so it seems okay. We'll just kind of keep an eye on.
Yeah, keep me posted, or if we need to clarify anything, let me know.
Okay,
so for each organization, which again is the sponsor or the academic unit, there's a couple of things that you're required to do. You'll have to have auditable record keeping. So this means you need to keep track of the requirements performed by each of the physicians or diplomats within your organization. You'll also, for this particular project, not all things for ABFM, just this particular project. We'll also need a portfolio manager. This is really somebody who is the key contact person, so that if the ABFM has questions or if individual physicians have questions, they have one point person to reach out to make sure that all of this is working smoothly. And then again, the goal is to track the physician participation in this and then notify the board of their completion in a timely way so that credit can be given. You can advance.
Yeah, the portfolio manager also is the system that we're giving access or permission to in our system to be able to submit completion data for the diplomates. So the person serves multiple roles. That person does not need to be a physician. They can be an administrator or whoever you deem to be the contact for your department or organization. So the PI requirements in general for the ABFM is that you have to have a defined project aim and intervention. Now, that's a little bit of improvement jargon there, so let me translate what that means. An aim is just what is it that I want to get better at, and an intervention is just a change. How do I want to attempt to get better? You have to have at least one improvement cycle, and what that means is I have to measure a before and after. So if I want to improve something, I am currently performing at X today. I then implement a change over a series of days or weeks or months. And at the end of that period of time, I will check again or measure again or whatever, and I am Y better or worse than I was when I started. We do not require that you actually improve, though it is our hope that whatever it is that you attempted to get better at, you did in fact get better at. And then just the last thing, as a general note, we don't, you have to comply with our industry support policy, which just says that you can't take money from pharmaceutical or device manufacturer as part of the program. You can use the money for other things, you just can't use it as part of this particular program.
Well, you can go to the next slide. So in order for a physician, a teaching physician, to participate in this and really meet the requirements, there's a couple of things that need to happen. The first is that doing a PI activity that is focused on teaching must be appropriate to the teaching physician's work setting. So whether it's working with residents or medical students, they need to be someone who's in training to be a physician. And so that's really important. That's something that is related to the ABFM Golden Aims. So that has to be something that's accomplished. And the reason that this PI activity actually fits with the greater scheme of continuing certification for the board is because it's related to quality improvement, like Kevin was talking about, something that improves the workplace of the physician. The second requirement is that the teaching physician must complete at least 180 one-to-one contact teaching hours. So this is so that we ensure that teaching is a big part of what this individual physician is doing, and that a PI activity surrounding this will make a meaningful impact. They need to participate in implementing the intervention. So there has to be something that they participate in that counts as that intervention, that project, something that they've done to improve themselves. And then they must review the project data. So again, this is pre and post data in accordance with whatever the sponsor's project plan is. Again, the sponsor being the academic unit, the medical school, the residency program, whoever is taking, the academic department, whoever it is that's taking on that role. And then really have to demonstrate active collaboration in the implementation of the project. So this is something that it needs to be meaningful for them to really get something out of it, and then for that to count for them for continuing certification PI credit.
And one of the things that we've already learned the last time we presented this was on the contact hours. So it's a minimum of 1-to-1, but if you are involved in teaching multiple people at one time, that's fine too. If it's 2-to-1, 3-to-1, 4-to-1, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
This we talked about a little bit before. So why are we doing this as a pilot? And it is really, we want to work with you and work with the STFM, we the ABFM, want to work with all the groups to make sure that we are providing a pathway that is actually meeting the needs that are out there, and that we're not introducing undue burden on either the STFM or the organizations or the diplomates. So that's why we're running this as a pilot. You can go to the next slide.
So as we put again, like we mentioned earlier, as we are gathering the data from you through the application process, we're actually not looking for ideas for projects or anything along those lines. We're really looking for diversity in academic units. So geographic diversity, type of academic unit, again, community-based residency programs, academic departments at medical schools, a variety of different, allopathic schools for preceptors that are going to meet the ABFM requirements, different structures, and that includes length and type of clerkship. So when we originally started this project, we really were thinking about medical students, and so want to make sure that we have something that is feasibly implemented both in block style clerkships and or longitudinal integrated clerkships, because those are the models that we think most commonly our community-based faculty are going to be teaching in, and we want to make sure that we've addressed the issues that may arise that may be different in each of those settings. You can go to the next slide. And so this is really the timeline for the pilot. And as Kevin mentioned, it's been such a pleasure to work with the ABFM because they've really been very open to getting this started. And really the goal is to have a quick turnaround for this pilot, implement as quickly as we can so that as we gather data, we can start sharing this and allowing other academic units to be a part of this who didn't initially participate in the pilot. So the call for applications opened at the beginning of this month. Today, you're on the Q&A webinar. The deadline for applications is at the end of this month, and then we'll be reviewing all the applications with a decision about which pilot sites at the end of March. We'll move through to a webinar for the sponsoring institution, so once you've been chosen to participate in the pilot, and the pilot to begin in the beginning of April. We'll have some opportunities throughout the next several months for the sponsoring institution to submit some outlines of potential PI projects. We'll do some video conferencing again to troubleshoot the ideas. In addition to troubleshooting, we're hoping that these video conferences will get a lot of the pilot sites together and really allow them to talk through what they've experienced, what's worked well, and share that with others and see how quickly and easily it is to implement some of those learned, those new changes or other attempts at implementation. And then we'll need, by the middle of November, the sponsoring institutions to submit any additional PI activities, projects, or interventions with final reports due at the end of January of next year. And again, the quick timeline really reflects the support of the board to implement this project and get it out to your community-based preceptors, as well as your medical school or residency-based faculty.
And when we say report, by the way, that's like a 3 to 5 minute survey that we're asking you to fill out. This isn't going to be like a multi-hour ordeal or anything like that. We just want to find out from you how valuable did you find the program and things like that. Any physicians that have received credit through the program, the ABFM will optionally survey them to find out their satisfaction or lack thereof with the program. And then we would compile all those results to determine what the next steps are and if there are changes that we need to make or that we, along with the SGFM, need to make. And ideally, at the end of this, we would be able to, quote unquote, relaunch the program in full force, have a knowledge base of information that we can provide those sites that come on based on lessons learned, both good and bad, that any of the pilot sites or we ourselves have learned during this year. So as we go to the last slide here, I just want to make sure that you're aware that there's no cost to participate. You're not paying the ABFM, you're not paying the SBFM or anything like that to participate. If you are in the pilot, because we don't anticipate ending the program anytime in the near future, you would, if you are participating in the pilot, you would participate in the program until you decide to leave. So even if things go awry and we are not able to relaunch the program in February of next year, which is our current plan, you would remain in the program. Anyone who is participating who's an ABFN diplomate would continue to be able to receive credit for their participation going forward. So we just want to make sure that we're not, selling you something and pulling the rug out from you later on. We don't plan on doing that. We also don't plan on making this be a program that you would be charged for in the future either. But I do want to make you aware of all of those. If you decide not to be in the pilot at this time, it's perfectly fine. It just means that after February 28th, we will not be accepting any more organizations into the program until the program officially relaunches sometime next year.
So
I guess at this point, we'll take any questions. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. And then do you want to, Kevin, do you want to introduce Ann Williamson?
Oh, yes, thank you. So Ann Williamson, who's on the phone, is on the ABFM staff here, and she will actually be the contact and we'll be running the pilot going forward, and in addition to a time working for the Board of Works at the University of Kentucky, and brings just a wealth of knowledge. So Anne, if you want to say hello and add any other information that you want to share.
Yes, this is Ann Williamson, and I'm very happy to be working with this program. Certainly, if you have any questions as you start the application process, because it sounds like most of you all are either have maybe opened an application or just thinking about opening an application, please feel free to send me an email or give me a call if you have any questions, and I will be more than happy to help you through the application process, and then certainly be there to answer questions and work with you once we get the program up and running.
Wonderful, thank you. I want to encourage the audience to go ahead and start submitting any questions you have. You should have a dialog box with your webinar panel where you can submit a written question, and I'll read those out loud so that we can get answers. So go ahead and submit those just so that we can kind of make sure that we answer all of your questions. And of course, Annie and Kevin, if you have other additional things you'd like to chat about, let us know.
I think one of the things that's really interesting is to make sure that everyone understands that the individual performance improvement interventions are not specifically prescribed by any means. So this is an opportunity for an academic unit to either provide resources to their teaching physicians in the community, if that's who is basically going to be a huge audience for this, and that's what we're hoping and anticipating, because again, this is in the umbrella of the Preceptor expansion program through SPSM. So the hope is that these performance improvement projects will help improve the quality of teaching using quality improvement principles that you all know from your clinical practices. And so an opportunity here would be for each individual academic unit to provide some sort of support to their community physicians through faculty development or encourage faculty development as a way to.
Hey, Annie, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I'm having trouble hearing you again. I think it's just starting to break up again. You were nice and clear before.
Okay, so let me know.
Okay, we're still continuing to have a little bit of an audio problem, but hopefully that'll kind of resolve itself here.
Sure. Let's see if this works better, because I'm on the receiver now. Is that better?
That is better. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry about that. So we've had a couple people submit some questions. One person had asked, let's see. Okay. For the auditable record keeping, do you have any suggestions for a method?
Do you want to take that, or you want me to?
Sure. Yeah, that's fine. I think there's a couple of ways to do this. And so one of the potentially easiest ways to do it is to maintain, some sort of either database or Excel spreadsheet that just keeps track. The most important thing to remember is that there's no anticipation of the board is going to audit anybody for these projects. However, it's important for us to make sure we keep track. One of the things that academics are probably already doing, whether that's department or residency faculty, they have actually a really good idea of and move to their community researchers. And if you're not doing that, this would be something that you could consider starting to do, keeping track of the hours. The project would maybe be something that's a little bit more difficult, depending on whether you want to keep them in paper or electronic, if that's in a database or if it's in a folder somewhere. But just keeping on to this is
You're breaking up there. You're breaking up there again. So let me add a couple of things there. So from the AVFN's perspective, we're sort of assuming that you're keeping track of the number of hours that the teaching physician is doing already, that you have some sort of system already that you're using to manage that type of situation whether the preceptor is being paid or not. You have some sort of tracking that you're already doing. We think, and this is again one of the reasons that this is a pilot, we think the only thing that we're asking you to do is to collect 2 additional pieces of information, and that's the measurement points. So at some point, the preceptor is receiving feedback or through survey or some other means, as an example, about them being a preceptor. So they're being evaluated, and they're given specific things, areas of improvement, for example. So that would be a baseline measure, for example. Then the teaching physician would do a educational intervention, as an example. So I might learn how to communicate better. I might learn how to be more thorough, be more patient, be more whatever it is I need to do in order to improve the thing that I've just been evaluated on. A period of time would pass. I would be evaluated again, collect that measurement, and those, we think, are the only additional things we're asking you to do, but we're not sure. So that's, I don't know, Annie, if you want to add anything to that.
Sure. Let me see. Can you guys hear me okay now?
Excellent.
Okay, so I think, one of the things to think about is what exactly might an example of a PI project really be. And so we think about this, again, as a clerkship director myself, one of the things I think about is really providing a way for preceptors to improve their teaching, specifically say they identify themselves as struggling with or maybe not being the best at giving feedback to students. And so basically what they would do is do some sort of self-assessment that would allow them to identify giving feedback as a weakness or something that they should improve on. Then they could do something, whether that's say, for example, STFM webinar on giving feedback. They would participate in that project, go ahead and implement some of those strategies with the next student or learner they worked with, and then follow up with a post-assessment either from themselves or from the learner regarding their skill set and how that improved. And that might be a way to organize that. And potentially having your preceptors submit something that describes that process, again, it could be very brief, would make sure that it met all the requirements.
That's very helpful. Thank you. We have quite a few questions kind of continuing to come in, so we can kind of work our way through some of these. Let's see. So we kind of talked about documentation, I think, already to a degree. Someone asked, well, I'll just quickly for housekeeping. Somebody asked if these slides will be available for download somewhere. I will make them available on our website, on the STFM homepage, and also by following this link, we have kind of the news release about this with the call for applications, and I'll make the recording of this webinar available as well as the slides for download if you're interested. So that's just something that you can kind of be aware of. But I also have somebody who's asking, do we have to get many physicians through the process within the time of the pilot? Many may not get their 180 hours done over that time period.
No.
No,
Okay.
yeah, I think that's a short answer. I think what we're trying to do is look at, the feasibility of this, and, many of your preceptors, again, may not get to that 180 hours in the time frame, but quite a few of them probably will, depending on, and maybe they'll take an extra student to meet those hours. So then you're really hitting a home run with this. So that would be ideal.
Perfect. We also had somebody ask, how often can a preceptor get credit for a PI project like this? Would it be annually?
We don't have any, this is another thing we want to learn. We don't have any limit on the number of times you can get credit. However, we will also say that according to the ABFM standards for certification and things like that, every one of our diplomates has a 3-year stage, and those 3-year stages have a certain number of requirements, which we talked about a little earlier. One, they have to do a knowledge self-assessment for a KSA that earns them 10 certification credits. They must meet a PI requirement, which this would, and would also earn them 20 points. They then, in the 3 years, must complete an activity that earns them another 20 points, and they can do that any number of ways. They could do another PI activity, which they could repeat this again, and that would be perfectly fine. If you do it 3 and 4 and 5 times in a 3-year period, at some point, the number of points that you get, it's nice, but it doesn't benefit you in any way. from the ABFM's perspective, more than happy for the organization to have that happen, though, and that's one of the things we hope happens. But we would give you points, but it won't matter.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that 180 hours needs to be met as a requirement for each of the times that PI credit is given. So a preceptor or a teaching physician would have to do, double the hours to get two types of credit. The other thing that was a question that came up when we presented this in Texas a couple of weeks ago is people asked over what time frame do they have to meet those 180 hours, and the answer is we don't have a time frame for that. Individual academic units may put some sort of time frame on that so that they can monitor it more easily, but from the ABFM standpoint, they haven't put a time limit on that. So it takes them several years to get there. Then they meet that requirement. Then they can do the PI activity during that time frame, but wouldn't get the credit until both requirements were met. It doesn't have to be within a year. It doesn't even have to be within the 3-year span when they apply for the credit.
Right. So credit is issued at the time of completion. So at the time that you've met all of the meaningful participation requirements, that is the date that you would get credit. Also, the other thing that we want to note, the moment that we indicate an organization is a part of the program, that is the date in which you can start to accumulate hours to earn credit. So preceptors that are doing it today, for example, even if you become a pilot 3 weeks from now, their hours that they're doing right now don't count for this program.
Makes a lot of sense. We had somebody else who asked, he explains that he's a community preceptorship director and will not be able to participate in the pilot since it's a new position, but would like to offer this program to our preceptors in the future. Do you anticipate a, quote, packaged program to be available after this pilot program is completed? This might include information to preceptors and ideas for PI interventions.
So I think the first part of that is that you'll always need an academic unit or a sponsor to be the one to attest. At this point, that's what we anticipate, that there will always be an academic unit or an institutional organizational sponsor that will attest for each individual precepting physician's credit. The hope is that over time, we will likely be able to compile a library of resources, like you mentioned, sort of a prepackaged PI activity that a preceptor might be able to do. Historically, the ABFM has done that in a variety of different ways. We're working right now on STFM to provide some resources for those who are participating in the pilot, but it's certainly possible and hopeful that during the pilot itself, we'll identify some of these projects that worked really well and then be able to hopefully share those resources among the pilot sites in the first year and then multiple academic units and other sponsoring institutions as we move forward.
Great, thank you. We also have somebody who asked, if there is feedback collected from the med student, are there any concerns about that individual being identified?
By whom, I guess, is the question. But the short answer would be that if a preceptor uses that as their baseline data, they need to get the data. How that data is given to them or collected might be different for different pilot sites. I don't know that we've been that specific about that content directly, but if a preceptor is getting feedback, say, from anonymous student evaluations, and then they make an intervention based on that anonymous feedback, and then after the intervention, other data is collected, then there's all of those things are housed within the academic unit anyway and never get forward fed to the ABFM. And it would be up to an individual academic unit how they give those baseline data or those final evaluations back to the preceptor. So really anonymity of the student is related back to the academic unit, and the actual data content itself is never forward fed to the ABFM. It would only be internal to the academic unit who's keeping those records for the audits like we discussed.
We don't want the
data. We also have someone who asked, does the physician need to be an STFM member in order to participate in this pilot?
No, they do not.
Okay.
There may be resources, again, available in the future. This hasn't yet been all ironed out, but there may be potentially resources in the future that might be available to STFM members that may or may not be available to the general physician public, but that hasn't yet been decided. So I think it's pretty unclear for us to say that. But participation in this pilot from either an institutional standpoint or an individual physician. They don't have to be STFM members. It's just something STFM has sponsored because of this bigger Preceptor expansion project.
One other thing that may or may not be in the list of questions, but we got asked when we were, the last time we presented this, was while the preceptor must be an ABFM diplomate in order to get credit from the ABFM, the medical student doesn't need to be a family physician or in training to become a family physician. They can be from any specialty.
We also had another question kind of a little bit ago. I'm going to back up to it. And so this person asks, can our intervention also be described and submitted for publication as part of this?
An individual academic sites project? Yes, absolutely. We would love that because then you get to share it with all your friends.
Great. All right, so we have someone else who, I know I haven't quite hit all of the questions yet, so I'll try to kind of bounce around a little bit here, but somebody does ask, so what are some other methods to receive baseline data instead of simply relying on the student?
Yeah, so another one that would be a way to do it would be a preceptor self-assessment. So one of the things we've talked about is developing an instrument that's related to like an individual survey that a preceptor could do to assess their own teaching skills, help identify places where they would like to improve as their baseline data. So this doesn't need to be a sophisticated data collection process. Sometimes, you know, giving a preceptor feedback from the students is actually a really easy way. It's an easy way for the preceptor because they're getting prepackaged information for which to address the actual intervention, how to really guide that intervention, what they should do. But the baseline data can come from self-assessment. It can come from peer evaluation. So if you, for example, this doesn't necessarily just relate to clinical teaching. So again, while that's where it started, there are certain people who work in medical schools or in residency who might even be doing small group or even large group teaching, and this could be related to that as well. And so some of your baseline data may be in the form of a peer assessment as another option. So self-assessment, peer assessment, learner assessment, all could be examples of baseline data that could be as a start.
Great, thank you. I'm kind of scanning through the questions here to see if I missed anything. Okay, so someone else asks, given the upcoming deadline, how quickly, oh, I can answer this one. How quickly will the webinar and PowerPoint be posted? Would like some other colleagues to review the opportunity. My official answer is within 24 hours. We're aiming for this afternoon, so within a few hours is the hope here. I think we'll be able to do that. So we'll post it on our website. And also, I actually have included for all of you who are attending right now, you'll get a follow-up email an hour from now that includes a link to the page on the STFM website where that information will be uploaded, as well as a link to the AB. So the STFM website will have the link for our webinar recording, but also there's this link that's on the screen right now for the ABFM details and where you can submit that application. So both of those will be in your follow-up email, but the webinar itself, the recording will probably be loaded a couple hours after that. So thanks for asking.
The application for the ABFM less than 10 minutes to complete.
It's breaking up again a little bit. Sorry about that. I know it's kind of a pain.
I think she was just saying that the application only takes a couple minutes. So if you, get some folks together and review the documentation or re-listen to this webinar, the application itself is a 5 to 10 minute endeavor.
Perfect. Sounds good. So let's see. Does the audience have any other questions? I'm scanning to see if I've missed anything. We did have, let's see, we had a clarification, and this was a while ago, a few minutes ago, somebody asked the number of physician hours do start counting when the pilot is approved. Is that correct? Okay. I thought that was what the case was. Let's see, what other details? Do you all have any other questions for us?
So one other thing, you can stop me if I start breaking up again, but there's really two ways, and maybe more than this, ways to do these interventions. One is individual physicians can do individual interventions, but there's nothing in this that says that a academic unit couldn't sponsor a multi-physician intervention as well. So that this PI projects could be a group teaching session or group education session with starting with self-assessment or with baseline data. And all of this could really be done in a relatively short amount of time, with then the follow-up data only being done after the physicians have an opportunity to practice their newfound skills in a setting that they were trying to improve, and then follow up with post-intervention data after that.
Great, that makes a lot of sense. Any other questions from the audience? Annie and Kevin, I'll just ask you guys, I think you've covered quite a few of them, but were there any other questions that came up that you recall during your Texas presentation that people seemed particularly interested in?
Yeah, I think we answered most of them at this point. We've gone back through. I think some of the keys that came up quite a few times were what kind of students and in what setting. And really, the ABFM has been pretty variable. So we started with this as an ambulatory thought process, but certainly inpatient teaching, rounding could be a possibility for those of you who do procedures. That would be a place that you may have learners. So really, there's a lot of different ways that this can be done, and different workplace settings. And we're still trying to learn what all those possibilities might be. And again, that's another benefit of doing this pilot in a variety of settings.
Great, thank you. Well, we still don't have any other audience questions. I'm sure there's a fair amount of this information is already on the STFM Call for Applications website, as well as the ABFM website. So definitely let us know. And like I mentioned, you will get a follow-up email after this webinar with a link to the page where the recording will be uploaded. And but it also has my contact information. This is Emily Walters with STFM, so that'll be ewalters@stfm.org. That's included in the email. So if you have additional follow-up questions, I might be able to get an answer, hopefully get an answer for you. So feel free, if you have continued questions, we'll see what we can kind of figure out for you. I do have one additional audience question that came in. She's asking, have you all already received applications for this pilot?
So our goal, along with the STFM, was to have at least 15 participants to make the pilot worthwhile. We've already had 18 organizations apply. We've had 20 others that have started. But at the moment, we've said that we've at least met the minimum. So we'll leave it open until the 28th, because that's what we said we'll do. And if we end up with 100, then that's what we'll go with.
All right, thank you. Well, do you have anything else to add that you'd like to kind of let our participants know? If not,
I don't think so.
Okay. I think we covered it pretty well. We've got a few thank yous coming in from our question box, and I really do appreciate the variety of questions that everyone kind of went ahead and sent in, and kind of helping out with the polls. I think we've kind of covered it, but like I said, definitely feel free to use that follow-up email to contact me, and I'll get you in touch with somebody who has an answer to any questions you have. So thanks. I appreciate your time today at this kind of generally lunch hour, depending on what time zone you're in. So thank you, and have a wonderful day.
Great. Thanks, everyone.